Hey there. Today I would like to talk to you about a slightly heavier topic, and that topic is addiction. I come from a family of addicts. Alcoholism was extremely rampant in my family, as was chain smoking. And my grandmother, who was a chain smoker, always prided herself on abstaining from alcohol. However, her entire life, she was also morbidly obese and was a sugar addict. She did manage to dodge the liquid sugar bullet, but she did not manage to dodge the sugar bullet altogether. Growing up in this environment, smoking definitely never held any appeal to me, neither did drinking. And I'm very grateful that in my life, I generally have not fallen victim to either of those addictions. I did go through a season where wine became a bit of a crutch for me. And in the evenings, after my family was in bed, I was drinking a glass of wine every night. And I got to a point where I had to assess that habit and whether or not it was serving me or being a hindrance. During different seasons of my life, I have fallen victim to food addiction, which generally is referred to as binge eating disorder. And I can speak more specifically about the binge eating disorder itself in another video. For example, during the pandemic, I was working full time as an editor at HarperCollins under a lot of duress, often working 7 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days plus. And the way I was coping with all of that stress was to binge eat. The food I was eating was very unhealthy, sugar-laden, highly processed food. And it was, as my binge eating disorder has always been, a tremendous source of shame for me. And therefore, I was doing most of it in the evenings after my family was in bed. And hiding the food around my office is my habit, and continuing to indulge in very unhealthy eating habits and hiding that from my family. Eventually, it got to a point where it needed to be dealt with. My husband and I had some very hard conversations about the issue. I actually decided to start going back to therapy, to work with a therapist to help me learn to cope in healthier ways and to better manage my stress and to work through some of the stress and the trauma that I had endured in the previous few years because of losses in my family and some other situations. And one day I was desperate to try to figure out how to help my body be healthier. Oh, and as a side note, I had a full hysterectomy at the beginning of 2020, which is a whole other video. So factor surgically induced menopause into this whole equation. And I realized I just didn't know what to do anymore. My way of dealing with weight loss in the past had been just as unhealthy as the way I had gained the weight. Generally involved extreme caloric restriction and over exercising, and that ended up causing its own problems as far as my health and overall well-being. And I just prayed and I said, Lord, I don't know how to take care of my body. That was a really hard realization for me to come to. And one night I just hopped online and I Googled how to lose weight in menopause. The options that came up were keto and something called carnivore. And I looked at the keto, which I had heard of before, but I didn't really know much about it. I just knew it had to do with tracking macronutrients. Once I read how keto works, I immediately said no. Because one of my struggles with my eating disorder is that the OCD often kicks in and any sort of tracking becomes a prison to me mentally, emotionally, and physically. I looked at the carnivore and I saw basically you just eat animal products. And I said, well, I like animal products. I like eggs. I like bacon. I like steak. I like hamburger. I like pork. I like seafood. Maybe this is something I could try. At the time, I was willing to try almost anything, provided it was actually healthy for me. We had gotten a quarter of a cow from a rancher, and I cooked a steak. I sat down and I devoured the whole thing in one sitting. Afterward, I felt so calm and so at peace. in a way that I had not felt in a very long time. And I sat there and I thought, could it be this easy? Like, could this be the solution to my problems with my food addiction and the stress and feeling so agitated all the time? So I did not become a full-fledged carnivore right away. What I did do is transition my diet to primarily animal-based. So I often will say I'm a 90-10 carnivore. So 90% of the time I eat animal-based, 10% I eat whatever I want. Sometimes that becomes like an 80-20. And unfortunately right now, I think it's sort of flipped. And therefore I'm having some struggles. But how this ties into my thoughts about addiction is that I've been doing the animal-based diet for quite a while. And one day, when I was eating sugar, but not large quantities of sugar, and one day my family had gone to Chick-fil-A and my children had gotten milkshakes and they brought the milkshakes home and put them in the fridge. My son had gotten the cookies and cream, which is my favorite. And so I said, ooh, I would like to try some of that. I picked up the cup and took a sip, and it was like the 4th of July in my brain. As soon as it hit my tongue, there was this explosion of sensations, called these like flashing lights and like beep, 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 almost like a pinball game or something. In that moment, I said to myself aloud, I am an addict. That was the first time I ever was willing to admit that to myself, that I had a problem with sugar addiction. And it really scared me and it shocked me. But at the same time, I was so grateful because I was able to speak that truth to myself in a way that wasn't judgmental or condemning, but was just the straight up truth. And recognizing that truth equipped me to see it for what it was and to go about addressing it in healthier ways. I obviously could go on a lot more about this addiction. What I will say is that particularly this year, for various reasons, I have continued to struggle with that. And I know for me, it's very much a slippery slope. I allow a little bit of it in the door, and then suddenly it's just like an all day, every day thing. And so I really have been seeking the Lord in that and just praying for him to help me focus more on nourishing my body in ways that allow it to function in the way that he created it to function. And I'm not here to demonize sugar. I'm not here to demonize carbs. I don't think that that mentality is helpful. For me, I know what my body needs to function best. And I know that as of late, I've been falling short in giving it what it needs to function best. I know I need to make better choices for my body because my body that is so fearfully, wonderfully made deserves it. And my family deserves to have a mother and a wife who is healthy and whole and well. I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you. And if you yourself are struggling with any kind of addiction, please know that my whole heart is with you in that. And that I will join you in prayer for release from that bondage. I know what a powerful stronghold it can be in your life. And just know that God is with you in it and that he will never leave you or forsake you, and that we can seek his release from those sorts of bondage, and that we can ask him to help us navigate those challenges, and that he can deliver us from any and all stronghold that we find ourselves in, if it is according to his perfect and gracious will. And I pray that he is with you this day and always.